I'm Amy Harrington. It's January 23rd, 2012, and I'm conducting an interview with Linda Bell Blue for the Archive of American Television in Studio City, California. So we want to start with just like 10 minutes worth of background information. So what was your name at birth?
Linda Lee Bell.
Okay, and where and when were you born?
I was born in Monett, Missouri on March 6th, 1956.
Okay, and where did you grow up?
I grew up in Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
Well, most of my youth, certainly when I went to school. Probably moved to Springfield when I was probably 5 years old and lived there until I went to college.
And what was your father's name and what did he do for a living?
His name is an unusual name. It's R.A. Bell, R.A. Bell, and he was an independent oil contractor.
And did the RA stand for anything?
It really, which is odd, but no. No, it's just an initial name. He is breathtaking. He's really my hero.
Tell me more about him.
Well, let's see. He and my mom were childhood sweethearts and really best friends. You know, they married for 47 years. But he was the best example to set for a child to see somebody working really hard. When I say he was an independent oil contractor, in Missouri, what he did is he bought gas and hauled it in a tank truck to independent stations. And so he would work on Christmas, he would work on Thanksgiving, and I have certainly worked on a lot of Christmases and Thanksgivings doing news all my life. And that, to me, is not a big deal. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you worked on Christmas? You worked, wow. And it was always that example that I saw. And he always saw to it that I worked really hard. I mean, I was always doing things around the house and around the yard with my brother. And, before there was any time to play. And he was just a really, really, really strong influence on me. I wanted to please him. And I guess that's not, maybe that's typical of many children, but it was very important to me that I succeeded because he had worked so hard to see me succeed. So,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
How did he react when you did succeed? I mean,
well, he was always pushing my buttons. He was always trying to make me do better. I mean, it was never in a humiliating way, very loving way. And as a child, I don't remember ever not being held and hugged and loved and kissed. I don't have anything but great memories of my childhood, but a lot of extra loving and kissing and hugging from both my parents and my grandparents. And I never had a babysitter ever in my life. And my grandparents always took care of us when my parents weren't there, and that was very rare. If they went somewhere, my brother and I went with them, and it was the four of us. So the closeness of that family is really etched in my soul. And my mother is still alive, and she has such a great heart, and she's very driven as well. But and as a team, they worked really hard just to make sure I was focused, and my brother was focused on, going to college and figuring out what we were going to do, because he wasn't really sure majoring in journalism I was going to ever make any money. He said, "What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do?" And so yes, when I started producing the news and national television shows, he was very proud of me. And every once in a while, I'd show him one of my bonus checks, and he would show it to all the neighbors. And that was really embarrassing. He shouldn't have done that. But he would. He said, "Linda, you just tickle me. You tickle me, Linda." So I hope that example that I have set, I'm trying to set it for my nieces and nephew, and the ones that are the next generation.
What was your mother's name, and did she work when you were a kid?
Yes, my mother's name is Frida Lee Lafferty Bell, and when she was carrying me, when she was pregnant with me, she was working at the Social Security Administration in Springfield, and she continued to work, and then she worked with my father in his business doing bookkeeping. And I used to watch her, in the summer when I was not in school, get dressed up, wear dresses, high heels, and go to work. And I just thought that was the greatest thing. I wanted to do that. I had big dreams of figuring out someday that I wanted to have a career too, and get dressed up and go to work and be one of those women.
And what were your hobbies when you were a kid?
Hobbies. Well, I would say eating. I used to watch the news all the time with my dad. We used to watch Walter Cronkite. And I can even remember when I was a little girl when JFK was nominated for president, being with my mother. And I couldn't have been very old then, probably 6, something like that. Does that sound right? No, even 4. And watching the news and just sitting, just this close to the television, in black and white television, and watching it and really being fascinated with it. And my father would get Newsweek magazine and he'd read it, and then I'd read it cover to cover, and we'd talk about it, and we'd watch the news together, and we'd talk about it. And I just wanted to be informed about everything. I wanted to know what was going on. And being able to talk to my father about what was happening around the world.
So did you know from an early age that you wanted to go into journalism?
I suppose so. I guess kids all go through different ideas of what they want to be and what they want to do. I can't recall ever wanting to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I did love the news, and I did, yeah, I guess so. I wanted to, I wrote for the school paper, and I was a yearbook editor, and I actually went to college when I was still in high school. I was the first generation of my family to go to college. My parents didn't go to college. And they, I could have graduated from high school in 3 years, but I was in the drum corps, and I was a yearbook editor, or one of the yearbook editors, and I went to private college in the afternoon during my senior year. And then went to college, and I got my bachelor's degree in 3 years at the University of Missouri.
Same school for the...
Different school. It was Drury College in Springfield. And quite expensive. And my dad saw that in the paper that they were accepting high school seniors. And I took chemistry and biology and all these things that you would take as to go to school before I was accepted into journalism school. I remember the chemistry class, the teacher saying, "Why is something red? Why is this dress pink?" And the reason is because the chemicals in it reflect pink light. And that's really all I remember out of the chemistry class. But I use that every once in a while.
That's good. Comes in handy. So when you went to college, did you study, was journalism your major?
Yes. The University of Missouri seems like an unlikely place to have a great journalism school. But if you go on the internet now, it will say it's the #1 journalism school in the country. More than Northwestern, more than Columbia. And I was just a very lucky little girl to have grown up in Missouri and to be able to have my parents send me to school paying in-state tuition to go there. And that's what I wanted to do, and I went for it.
And in addition to your classes, were you involved in journalism in other ways at school?
Well, at the University of Missouri, you get accepted to the professional school when you're a junior. So there's a law school, a med school, and then there's a journalism school. So you have 2 years, freshman and sophomore, and then you get accepted to the school for 2 years. So, and it's very hard to get into. But before then, there is a school paper. It's called the Man-Eater. And that's because, I guess because the school team is called the Tigers, and that's why the paper is called the Man-Eaters. So the Man-Eater, and I covered sports. And because the University of Missouri was then part of the Big 8 football team, which is Oklahoma and Nebraska, and one of those teams went to the Orange Bowl every year, and Oklahoma was usually the #1 team. And so I went and I was credentialed to cover games and on the sidelines and shooting film and interviewing, athletes. And I just thought that was very exciting. It was something else I was doing at the time.
And you were on camera at the time?
No, I don't like being on camera. It's not my favorite thing to do. I think that while I was at journalism school at Missouri, the university is the license holder of the television station, the NBC affiliate, which also makes it unique. So you're actually on an NBC station. So we would do cut-ins. You know, the Today Show would go 7 to 7:25, and then they throw it to local. So all over the country, local cut-ins are happening. So in Columbia, Missouri, I'd be sitting there doing the cut-in, and I just hated it. I just was miserable. I hated it. I loved producing it. And I think I found for women in the long run that there is far more longevity behind the scenes and far more power.
What didn't you like about being on camera?
It just didn't feel comfortable. It's not anything I ever wanted to do. And I meet so many young women who are interns, and they want to be on camera. They want to be an anchor. They want to be a TV. They want to cover Hollywood and be on television. And I think about that, and I think that you can have a great career, but few people have a career like Mary Hart has had, like Nancy O'Dell has. And that's the far fewer number. And a lot of people are weeded out. And you know, there'd be people lined around this lot who would like to have those kinds of jobs. So for whatever reason, I just fell in love with producing the news at the journalism school, and producing the 6 o'clock news and the 11 or 10 o'clock news in the Midwest, and always wanted to do that, and always kind of clicked in with doing it.
That's great. So what was your first job after college?
I went through college at Missouri after I graduated in 3 years, and so then I worked in Houston at a NBC affiliate. No, CBS affiliate, KHOU. Then I worked in Miami at what was then the NBC affiliate, WC. Oh, mercy. It's not the name of the station anymore. It's WCKYC-T or something. I'll have to check that for you. It was a long time ago. Then I worked in Detroit at WDIV, which was the NBC affiliate, and went on vacation to San Francisco and did a job interview with the CBS affiliate KPIX. And worked in 2 stations in San Francisco at KPIX and Kron. And then I came to KCBS here.
So talk about working in a local news station in general, but then also kind of the differences in those, because those are very different markets.
They are very different markets. They're all pretty big markets. At the time, Miami was a bigger market than it is now. But to get a job in Houston, that was a big deal. That's, I think, a top 10 market now. Maybe 11 is where it is now. Really to get the basics and watch people. And, you know, I was doing writing, and I wasn't really producing then. And then when I went to Detroit, I was producing the 6 o'clock news. Very big town, very big news town, between the United Auto Workers and the Teamsters and all the money and the political power that's based in Detroit. It was a real education for me, because the people who worked there were very seasoned. I met people that came into that newsroom that I dreamed about meeting. Jessica Savage. I shook her hand. It was like one of the firmest handshakes I'd ever felt in my life. Jane Pauley was on the Today Show then. So I really learned a lot really fast there. Markets are different. You know, in a market like Detroit, where labor is very important and the economy is very important and the weather is very important, is much different than Miami. Miami is a good news market too. Many times for that reason at the time was because of crime. I remember covering a story about a 91-year-old woman named Eleanor Haggart who was murdered in Miami Beach. For some reason, that just seemed to be the news that surrounded that market at the time. San Francisco, way different. You know, way different market, more locally, big place, Fifth Market. Yes, it's San Francisco, but the area of dominant influence, the ADI of that market is Oakland and San Jose and Marin County, and it's, you know, very politically liberal, and it's just every place is different, and there were always floods. I think I started there in January, and there were always floods and always huge things happening. I was there in San Francisco when the hostages were being released in Iran, when Reagan was being sworn in, and Jimmy Carter, they would not let Jimmy Carter was leaving. Jimmy Carter was leaving office. And the hostages were sitting on the runway in Tehran, and they would not let the plane take off until Reagan was president. I remember that moment very clearly.
So again, to clarify, at this point, you're you're on camera in these various, or you're behind?
No, always the producer.
Always the producer.
Yes.
Okay. And why did you move so much? Is that the nature of the news business?
You want to move up from market to market. You want to always get to the bigger market. That's kind of the game that local news people play. And that's what I was trained to do at Missouri, to produce local news. And I think that, you go from Miami, which is a big market, to Detroit, which is a bigger market, San Francisco, a bigger market, and then to Los Angeles.
Before we get to Los Angeles, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you learned a lot in all these different markets. What did you learn about how to handle like a breaking news story? What were the important lessons that you learned?
Well, I think that I learned that at the beginning in Missouri, that really, to get a breaking news story on the air, it really comes from the control room. It comes from the producer who's telling the director what to do and calling the shots and talking in the anchor's ear. So when there was a breaking news story, it was like get your blood going. It was just breathtaking. You want big stories. Even now, I want big stories, and I loved a breaking news story to try to beat the competition on the air, whatever it was. You had to beat the other two market stations in the market at that time, because Fox wasn't a network then, just CBS, ABC, and CBS and NBC. So it was just the manner of winning, being first, being right. And I loved it. And I loved changing the shows once the show had started. My husband was the director of the news in San Francisco. That's where I met him.
And what's his name?
Steve Blue.
Okay.
And when I was on that vacation, when I went from Detroit, where I lived, to San Francisco, I went in the control room on my job interview, and I watched them do the news. And I've never seen anybody direct like he could direct. He took my breath away.
In what way?
He just didn't make any mistakes. The worst nightmare for a producer is that you produce a show. You've spent all day on it. It's sucked the blood out of your system. You love it. You're in love with it. It's going to be perfect. And you hand it over to the director, and it's live. And for whatever reason, it just goes down the toilet. That happened a lot in Detroit, I remember. And then I met this person, this Steve Blue, and he just was breathtaking. And he could, at that point at KPIX, they were producing the news with triple system film, meaning that to explain that, the director had to not just roll a tape like we would now, or a file, 3 reels of film simultaneously. And so if there was a 20-second establishing shot in a piece, that was the A-roll. That's the B-roll. The A-roll's the soundbite. And you had to dissolve in between them, and then the track was on the full coat, which was the third. And he just didn't make any mistake. I never seen anything like it. It was really something. He was, really great. And when I started producing the 11 o'clock news, and he directed it, when we could read each other's minds. Because we get into break one, and I'd want to change it. It'd be like a minute and a half break. I said, let's change some things. And I started talking in the anchor's ear, and I just did it in my mind, I was making it better. And hopefully I did, but he stuck right with me. He just, nothing ever really got him off balance.
Right. What were some of the major stories that you covered during those different markets? Like, what were some of the breaking news stories that?
Let's see. I don't remember in Houston. That was a long, long time ago, and I wasn't there very long. And Miami, the crime, like I mentioned the story, and weather, hurricanes and weather. In Detroit, strikes, union strikes, really going into the Ford Assembly plant in Dearborn, really understanding what was going on there. Labor negotiations, how powerful the unions were and are, how much money the auto companies made then, and how powerful they were, how powerful General Motors was. San Francisco, lots of weather, just floods like the winters that we know in California and San Francisco, lots of weather. I remember lots of crime in San Francisco as well. I remember doing a live shot once on the 11 o'clock news, and we really didn't know what was going to happen, but this ambulance pulled up to San Francisco General Hospital, and we had a live shot there, and the ambulance, the gurney came out, and the guy had a butcher's knife in his chest, and the anchorman was voicing it over live. You're so young then, well, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to do until you really knew what was going on, but it was like in the moment. And I will say I have made so many mistakes as a producer. I've done a lot of things right, but you make your mistakes in the smaller markets. I make mistakes every day at Entertainment Tonight and The Insider as well. But you learn from them, and I'm quite adept at saying, oh, okay, I really messed that up. That's completely my fault. I shouldn't have done that. So I shouldn't have taken the risk on that. But you own it, and I think the staff respects you. Along the way, you see different management styles and how have you been managed, and that you take a little bit of each one of those places in Miami and Houston and Miami and Detroit and San Francisco and the news in LA, and you take that with you, and you see how the people you worked for manage the staff, and you become a manager yourself. And I think you try to take the best of all of it.
How would you define your management style then, and how has it evolved?
Well, I would say then when I started producing the 11 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news in Miami, in Detroit, I was 23 years old. And I'm sure I was a little like, oh my gosh, it's a breaking story, here we go, like a little crazy and enthused. And, I think that, you calm down as you get a little bit older. I still get really excited, though, when there's a breaking news story. I mean, I get in the middle of the newsroom and start talking and, this is what we're going to do on the web, this is what we're going to do with radio, this is what we're going to do on this show, and just kind of give everybody direction. But I think I have matured into a mother-like figure for the staff here. And this is a big family. We've all worked together a very long time. And these people know what they're doing. They're the best in the business. And I listen to them. And when when we make a decision and we have to go and we have to do something, and we all move together. But I know their mothers. I knew them before they got married, and their pregnancies, and the kids now that are, getting ready to go to college. I mean, I've been here a long time, and between Hard Copy and Entertainment Tonight, I've been here a long time, and it's like, to me, I'm the luckiest girl in the world. But all that training in news, producing a new news in school, and all of that set me up for what I'm doing now.
Well, before we go there, let's talk about moving to Los Angeles.
Okay.
So how did you come from San Francisco to Los Angeles?
Well, Los Angeles is the number 2 market. I mean, it's a big deal to get a job in Los Angeles. And I started producing the weekend news at Channel 2 here. It was KNXT then. And then I did the news with Connie Chung when she was the anchor. And I really liked working with her a lot. But which is just a bigger deal. I mean, in San Francisco, it's not as unionized. Here, everything was much more. That was an education for me within the organization of Channel 2, what a producer can do and not do. I mean, touching the editing equipment or camera gear, or what you can and can't do, doing the news. Trying to make it as knowing that the promotion of the news is as important as really getting that audience in, retaining the audience, how to get the biggest rating. Really spending a lot of time. That was back in the days of Lou Grant in Dallas. That's how long ago it was that I produced the 11 o'clock news here. And there's a tease at 10:30. And I would spend, an hour writing that tease because that was my best chance to get the audience in. So, really appreciating what it took to compete against the other big shows that were out there.
And you started with the weekend show and then moved to the weeknight news?
Went to the 11. And that's a great lifestyle to produce the 11 o'clock news. You sleep late, you get up and you work out, you go in, and then you go home and you watch Letterman, and then went to sleep and slept late. Now I don't get any sleep. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's and now I'm really quite boring. I have to go to bed like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. It's just really pathetic.
That's understandable.
It's really sad.
It's very understandable. So what was it like in LA? How was LA different from the other markets?
Well, Dennis Swanson, who was then the news director and perhaps the general manager right after that at KABC, described LA to me in another job interview that I had done on a vacation, I guess, that Los Angeles is really 30 Omahas rolled into one. It's really not Beverly Hills, and it's not Hollywood. If you take what it is Orange County, and it's Riverside County, and it's a very big size market, a huge signal strength, lots of different people, very conservative Orange County, a very, liberal part of the Hollywood and Beverly Hills that or this I worked there a year, and then would there be a fire or something happening somewhere, and it's still a place I'd never heard of. It's a very, very, where's Norwalk? What's Azusa? I thought I knew it all. I've been studying this map. I've been doing the news here forever. It's felt like, and things would happen in other places. While I was producing the news at Channel 2, then I became executive producer of the news. And my best friend was Larry Perrett. And he was executive producer of the news at KNBC. And there was some story that was happening. I think it had something to do with one of those people that was going around the globe in one of those light airplanes, and they were landing. And they were coming in, and something was wrong, or something. Earlier, I thought, so I went to the master control at Channel 2, and he went to master control at Channel 4, and we were on the phone together, and it was like, who was going to get on the air first? And I won. I said, we're going on the air. I had to get the director off the phone. He was talking to his wife or something, but I said, we got to go right now. We got to go right now. We got to go now. And this is it was great. That makes you, winning on a big story makes you. That's a great feeling.
And how old were you when you became executive producer of the number 2 market?
Okay, let me think about that. I was maybe 27. 27, maybe. Yeah. And that was a very exciting time. I did a lot of things in Los Angeles. From Charles Manson to covering the Democratic Convention in the Moscone Center in San Francisco. Lots and lots of, to covering, brush fires and stories that just really shut down a market. Really the wild weather, just won an Emmy for covering the weather, and it's, I remember when I won the Emmy, I went up and I said, I'm the lucky one here because I got to stay inside where it was warm and dry, and everybody else who won this was wet, soaked wet and sick. And so it's, I just feel like that I've never been like one to say, hey, I did that, look what I did. It's always been about a team. And I guess you learn that from managers as you go. But back to that core of 4 people, my dad, my mom, and Randy and me, we were a team. My brother, Randy. And this is the team. This is the family.
So how did you land an interview with Charles Manson?
Well, this is how it all started. The general manager at Channel 2 at the time was a man named Tom Van Amberg. And he said, and it was sweeps. We're coming up on sweeps. And he said, Linda, I want you to get an interview with Charles Manson. And I said, okay, I'll see how I can do that. So I kind of there's no internet then. Everything's a little different than it is now, So he was in San Quentin in Marin County, north of San Francisco, not on death row, but I sent a telegram to Charles Manson. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to send a telegram. I don't remember why exactly, but I sent a telegram to him. And apparently, he walked around with it in his shirt for like 2 weeks. He thought that was the coolest thing, that somebody had sent him a telegram. And at the time, Manson could do 4 interviews a year, 1 every 3 months. So the public information officer went to Charles Manson, as he did 4 times a year, with a stack of requests from Japan and Brazil and Australia and France and many people in this country, and said, well, who are you going to do the interview with this time, Charlie? And he said, I'm going to do the interview with that Bell chick. So the way I found out is I get a collect call from Lynette Fromm, Squeaky Fromm, who was, in another prison, I think in Virginia, for trying to shoot Gerald Ford. But she was the most foul person. The way she spoke to me, it was just, like, how dare you try to do an interview with Charlie? Just like that was her person, but she was serving as his PR person, really. He got to her to call me to say it was okay after this, like, incredible cursing episode. So I was kind of excited about that. And then later on, I got a postcard, and I really didn't realize initially that it was from Charles Manson, saying that the interview was okay, that we could do it. And then we found out from the public information officer. So we flew up there. Bill Stout, who was a veteran Los Angeles newsman for many years at CBS, worked at Channel 2. And so we went into San Quentin and we met outside that we drove up outside the gates. We couldn't wear jeans. No one in the crew could wear jeans because the inmates wear jeans. And we went inside and down the road, and we went inside the building, and we had to sign a release saying that they would not negotiate for our freedom if we were taken hostage. So, in retrospect, maybe that wasn't that smart, but I feel like that it didn't really matter to me then because I just wanted that interview so badly. It was like, we really got this? And so we went into a room. We all signed the release. And he came out.
How many of there were you?
Three, probably. Three, crew, and Bill and me. And he came in, sat down, no chains. The guards were there. He talks. He's so mesmerizing that you could really understand how these young women were taken in by him, the Manson girls. He doesn't really make a lot of sense when he talks. He just talks in spurts. He doesn't really directly answer a question. But it's just like, okay, so we're sitting there. I wasn't afraid. None of us were afraid. But, this swastika's in his forehead. He just kind of goes off and talks about things. And then we were leaving, and he put his arm around me. He jumped up and put his arm around me and started singing an Elvis Presley song to me, Ain't Nothing Like a Hound Dog. And I really wasn't even scared then. But he's just very unpredictable. I don't think he's insane at all. At all. He knows exactly what he's doing. But he is mesmerizing. Really. I don't want to say charming, that's too much. But mesmerizing. You could see how he could really woo people into doing things, and with the drugs they were doing and everything else they were doing, get them to do what he got them to do.
Do you remember what the telegram that you sent to him said?
It was very simple. It just that we wanted to do an interview. And it was signed by me as a woman. And that I explained who I was. And no, I wish I could find the postcard. I have the postcard somewhere. No, but that was the trick. That's what did the trick.
Right. And besides the fact that the station manager came to you and said, we want to do this interview, why did you want to interview Charles Manson? What was the appeal to you?
Well, the appeal is, first of all, my boss wanted it. It was something that not many people got an interview with him. He didn't, he spoke 4 times a year if he wanted to. Those were the prison rules then. And there wasn't always a domestic interview. I mean, sometimes they were done internationally. So it was something, that we were really going to get this. And we were, worked on the questions for a very long time. And the rules are different now. Now he's in another prison near Fresno. What is the name of that prison? And I interviewed him again. And he remembered.
Folsom?
No, it's where all the Crips and Bloods are. And it was really interesting. It's a very modern prison because it was like Get Smart. You remember Get Smart? I mean, where like the doors would open this way, and then they check your ID, and then you go like 5 feet, and the doors would open this way or this way. I mean, it was so high security. I'll think of the name of it in a minute. And I mean, then he walked in, handcuffed to the sides like this. I mean, football player, massive refrigerator Perry size football players on either side of him. Much more constrained. And now we can't do any interviews at all.
Did he remember you from the
yes.
first interview?
Oh, yes.
Is that how you got the second interview?
Yes, yes. Corcoran State Prison. And we flew into Fresno, yeah.
And was
that's
he
where he is
different?
now.
Was he different in the second interview than in the first?
I think he answered questions more directly. I think, but he was still the same. He's older. Nobody knows what he looks like now. He's spoken of me in parole hearings. He's talked about me, which is kind of creepy.
In what way?
He just, talks about me as Linda Bell. I mean, he just rants. It's ranting. I don't know. exactly. I wasn't at the parole hearings, and I haven't seen the video, but people who were there have talked about it. And actually, he has people who still follow him. I think that somehow at one of the other TV stations here in Los Angeles that there was a security call that somebody, somehow, something about that our security people here have some names of people that not to let on the lot.
Right.
But
How did that first interview with him affect your career? Did it make you more well-known? Did it have any effect at all, do you think?
I don't think so, really. I don't think so. I think when you do a show that's a daily show, that you have to just do it every day, and you're just as good as the last show you did. And I'm sure we did several parts on it. We did do several parts on it, and the general manager was very pleased, and I think he was very good to me. He was very impressed that we got the interview. But I think you're on to the next story. Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of the other big stories from your time there. That you mentioned the Democratic Convention. So what was that like?
It was at the Moscone Center, and it was the year that Geraldine Ferraro was nominated as vice president, and we produced the local news out of there, and it was really exciting, just to be in a convention center for the first time and see, up high where all the networks were, and how they were looking down and see all the delegates, and for a woman to be nominated. It was pretty exciting. It's just another big deal in your life another big event that you get to cover.
And you also covered the Summer Olympics. Is that true?
That's right. That's right. And when they were here in Los Angeles. Right. I remember that is when the biggest story that I remember from that is when a young South African woman named Zola Budd I was in the Coliseum with my husband. Had been married. Yeah, we were married by then, I think. And a huge race was ending inside they were running in, and then they were doing several laps. And there was a big runner, United States runner, that was going to win. And she and Zola Budd kind of tripped over each other. And the United States person, oh my gosh, I can't remember her name. She was really threw a fit. And Zola Budd, was this person that had run barefoot all her life and really ran her way to this Olympics. And that was the real story, I think. I think that I remember that the most.
That's great. Any other stories from that time? Any other highlights for you from your time in LA on the news?
Well, we would cover the Emmys and the Oscars, but not like Entertainment Tonight is allowed to cover them. And little did I'd watch Entertainment Tonight, and it started when I worked in San Francisco. It was the first, when it launched. And I watched it, and I thought, someday I would love to produce that show. People would ask me, what do you want to do, Linda? Do you want to go on and produce the Today Show, or what would you like to do? And I'd like to produce Entertainment Tonight. It just was so ahead of its time graphically. And what it was doing, it was the first of its kind to make entertainment news so important. And the graphics, I'd always try to copy the graphics. They'd do it over the shoulder box, and another box would drop down from below it. And I loved that. And I remember having Steve do that in San Francisco on the 11 o'clock news when we were doing it, and we copied that. Just, really being so impressed with what it was, never thinking that I would ever have that job.
Were you always, even when you were little, were you into like celebrity, did you read celebrity magazines? Were you into that kind of stuff?
Not like I read Newsweek, not so much. I loved going to the movies, and I, watch TV. Dark Shadows was my show. When I come home from school, Dark Shadows with Barnabas. And now it's going to be a movie. Warner Brothers is making a movie. So with Johnny Depp as Barnabas. So, really kind of goes full circle, doesn't it? But, and those first images just came out.
Yeah, what'd you think?
That's good. It's going to
It's
be good.
cool, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Vampires? Can't go wrong.
By the way, Mary Decker was the other runner.
That's right.
Karen flipped it to me.
Thank you. Mary Decker, yes. Did you remember? Oh, okay.
She Googled it. So why did you leave CBS, and where did you go from there?
I went to Hard Copy, which was a new show being started. Yeah, a new show that was being started by Paramount. to be a partner show with Entertainment Tonight, and it was going to be a more news-based show. And I didn't come up with the name, but I was the managing editor from the very beginning. And, you know, it was a very successful show. It became a top 10 show. And so I was managing editor. I was there 6 years. And in the last 2, I was executive producer. And it was a very great time to be on that show. I mean, the O.J. Simpson trial was happening. And the Michael Jackson. Actually, I had a really good friend who was the news director of Channel 4. Oh my God.
It's hard when you're pressured to think of names, it's hard to
No, I can see his face. He's the head of CNBC now.
Mark. Who's the head of CNBC? He's the head of...
There's Googling happening.
Oh my gosh. He was the news director. Mark, it is a good friend of mine. I'm going to be really embarrassed with Mark Hoffman. Okay, Mark Hoffman was the news director at KNBC. I was executive producer of Hard Copy. They break a story that the LA County District Attorney's Office has a warrant to go into Neverland. And I was watching it, and I talked to him, and we basically just stole the story from him. I got Diane Diamond, who was a producer and reporter on Hard Copy, and I said, this is a huge story, we got to get going. And I admire Diane in that she is quite tenacious. And, you know, Hard Copy owned that story. We really did own so much of the information that happened on that story with Michael Jackson, and information that we got from, from investigators. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize that Marcia Clark, who later prosecuted O.J., signed that warrant. The deputies went in and said, we need somebody in this office to sign the warrant, and everybody else was out to lunch, so Marcia Clark signed it. And I later worked with Marcia very closely here at ET. But the Michael Jackson story was such a big story that you just can't believe it, and you can't believe all the developments that came out of it. That the social services people who were talking off the record, the deputies who were talking, and the investigators who were talking, that there were, and the London papers would break a lot of news about it, and then a lot of it wasn't true. And it was that was before the web. So I think that most of what you read on the web, 50% you can't believe. But then there were the London papers then that you really couldn't believe. So, but just a story that I think really put Hard Copy on the map.
So talk about that. How do you in the pre-internet world, how do you get that kind of information? How do you get to those kind of people who
good old-fashioned way? You roll up your sleeves. I mean, Diane took a notebook and met with, found out who they were. You sniffed around. You call people and other prosecutors, and you find out, who knows what, and you meet them for coffee, and you find out what's going on. And there was so much information that was never reported. That really I shouldn't talk about now, but that stories of things that people had told us had happened there, that really never got on the air. And you want to be fair. And as the story progressed, and Michael Jackson came out on camera talking about his genitals, and it was just every day there was a development in that story that you really couldn't believe was happening. And and then O.J. happened after that, and then everything.
Yeah, let's stick to Michael for a second.
Sure.
So what is the line? Like, how do you decide what the line is? You said there were some things that you heard that you didn't think maybe were fair, or
well, I mean, things that were not substantiated, the things that I believed to be true, but I knew from one person, and things that happened with some child actors whose names I won't mention, but things that people who worked at Neverland and witnessed things told us things, and many of them we did put on the air. Others we did not. And but when all the pieces start falling into place, you really just have to sit there and judge in your stomach. Do you believe this person enough, or what is this enough information to go with?
And did you ever have a moment where you did go with something and then you thought, oh, maybe we shouldn't have?
Not that I recall.
Yeah.
Not that I recall, but we were very aggressive on the story.
Was there ever anything that you didn't go with that someone else then went with that you thought, oh, we should have gone with it?
That's happened to me so many times. I think I actually am a little conservative about things. I'm pretty conservative. And because I think America, I think that's part of growing up in the Midwest, in Springfield, Missouri, that America has a stomach that so many people I work with in this industry, really brilliant people, have worked in New York and have worked in Los Angeles. And they don't know where St. Louis is, or they have never been to Denver or Wichita, Kansas, or, you know, they're flying back and forth. And they're really talented and really good. But having grown up with there, and I think what has helped make me successful is having the right gut to know what people are going to absorb on the other side of the screen and not be offended by. As an example, on ET Today, George Clooney did a interview with Newsweek, a round table, and it's going to be on the web, and so much of what he was saying had to be bleeped. And I'm not so sure that that is the best thing for us to put in our open with that much bleeping, because I think in a country now where Newt Gingrich is, you know, gathering steam, a more conservative country, it's 50-50, liberal and conservative, that offends a lot of people. The bleeping offends people. So if I'm trying to get viewers in and I'm bleeping, that's a turnoff to them. So I have to be careful, but I'm not so sure I would have realized that if I had not grown up where I grew up.
Right.
You know, it's a very different sensibility. In big markets like Atlanta and big overnight metered markets, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, in the Midwest, St. Louis, Chicago, you know, where people may be more accepting of it on the coast. I don't know. It's just like, doesn't sound right. Let's not, I don't want to push people away.
Right.
You know, we do it in the story, but let's not put it up at the top so they're going to click away because they're afraid their children are going to hear a bad word.
Right.
And it's Clooney's right to say that, and Newsweek's right to put that up on the web. I mean, you know, I'm not for censoring anything, but there are certain things we cannot say as broadcasters, and our show is broadcast. And so we just have to be, you know, walk the right line there.
Yeah. Back to Michael Jackson just for a minute, because it seems like he's somebody that kind of followed you, or you followed him through your career. You obviously circled around to other Michael Jackson stories later.
Right.
So why do you think he was somebody that was so newsworthy and so in people's consciousness?
Well, I think he's probably one of the 5 most famous people in the world. I was at a TV conference once in Monte Carlo. I spoke at a conference. Actually, I narrated a panel, or not narrated it, hosted a panel of international journalists in Monte Carlo, and Prince Albert's television thing, and he was lovely. But all these different perspectives on who the biggest star in the world was. And, you know, really, music stars. You can go, oh gosh, I was in Phuket. This is after all the damage there was. I went to Bangkok and Phuket on vacation, and we're driving in a cab, and John Denver song's on, and I'm like, what? We're in Phuket in Thailand, and John Denver is playing. And I talked to the driver. I like to talk to cab drivers, and get information from them, just to kind of find out about their life. And big star, he's dead. He was already dead. Big star in Phuket. Now, who knew that? And so I found out at that conference, really, that Madonna, Michael Jackson, music stars are really universally the biggest stars. Right. More than a movie star, more than a television star, really. You know, I still think probably the most famous person in the world that I've ever covered was Princess Diana. I got to meet her once.
Tell us about that.
It's when she came to the United States for the Met Gala. And I was a guest of somebody who had bought a table. And she came up the steps, and I was standing in the lobby of the Met. And there she was, and she was so tall and so perfect. And she had on this blue dress that was backless, and her skin was perfect. I mean, the most perfect skin. I mean, I have freckles and all kinds of ugly things on my back, so I can never wear a dress like that. And so I was like, wow. And she kind of kept looking at me and smiling, and she talked to everybody. And so we went inside, and everybody was seated. And she was seated at the center table with Barbara Walters and, I don't know who else. So I had a friend who was there. She was a friend of Ivana Trump's. And she said, Linda, let's go meet Diana. And I said, I don't think we can do that. She said, let's go meet her. We went right up to the table. And she said hello. I shook Princess Diana's hand and said hello and how much I'd enjoyed and admired her. And was so thrilled to meet her and that she was in New York that night. And I'm like, this is so exciting. I just got to meet Diana. It was really cool. I loved that. That was kind of one of the really greatest moments for me. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't been executive producer of Entertainment Tonight. I would never have been in the room.
Right.
But I was really, really thrilled. Didn't expect that to happen. When William and Catherine came, they landed, because we covered their wedding. I mean, E.T. big time covered their wedding. We had an army of people there. We were there for 2 weeks, and it was so exciting. And we had people at Westminster Abbey, and we had people at the palace, Buckingham Palace, and, I was during the wedding, I was in front of Buckingham Palace, and when the Queen came out in that yellow suit, that yellow dress, in her like maroon colored car, I was like, oh my, that was really thrilling too. And then when she came back when William and Kate came back in the carriage, we were there. It was really, really cool. So that's May, and then they come to LA later in the summer, right? They go to Canada and they come down to LA. And Variety was hosting an event at the Beverly Hilton. So the first place they went was to the Beverly Hilton. And I was in a small group of people inside the room where they were having this reception. I mean, Mark Cuban was in there, and a couple of movie producers and a couple of agents. And so I was going to get to meet them. And I was like, I got to meet Diana, and I'm going to get to meet them too. So here comes William. He's ahead of Kate. She's shaking everybody's hand. And talking a lot on the other side of the room. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get to meet her. They're going to pull her away. And then William comes up, and I talked to William, and I said, I covered your wedding. And he said, oh, yes. And I said, my favorite moment was when you drove away in the convertible. And he said, I love that. Everybody was talking about Kate's dress. I'm so happy you liked the car. He said, the car runs on red wine. I said, no, are you kidding? He said, no, it runs on red wine. And so it's this ethanol fuel that is made from grapes and red wine. So I thought it was kind of cool. He got real excited that somebody liked something else more than her dress. And then I met her, and she came up, and she was like floating on the clouds. I mean, born to be this person. Just delicate and beautiful and soft-spoken and gentle. And I shook her hand and talked to her, and I told her I covered her wedding, and it was so exciting to meet her, and because there wasn't that much time. And what I really am mad about to myself is that I shook her hand, and on the other hand was that ring that Diana had worn all those years, and I didn't even see it. I was so nervous about meeting her that I didn't even get a close-up of that blue ring.
And you didn't see it when Diana wore it either? You didn't notice it?
I didn't notice it then. I was too excited, I guess. But I didn't even think about it until like a day later. But they were really fascinating. And those people are, if you think about, I was obsessed with the, are you going to put all this in where I can't remember the name of anything? What was the Showtime series? The Tudors. The Tudors. Okay. I was obsessed with the Tudors. I've loved that show. And you're thinking about, okay, this is going to be, they're going to make a show about this man in 100 years. I mean, what media would it be on? It was really, really kind of special, I thought.
What is it about people like them and Diana and Michael Jackson and Madonna? You've met a lot of these people. You've been in their presence. Is there a quality that you think kind of is present in all of them?
There is a certain destiny quality about the royals, I think, and obsession. I mean, People magazine sold its most covers with Princess Diana over the years. I think the biggest selling covers last year were the wedding. So, are they any different than us? No, I guess not, in a lot of ways. I'm sure they hurt, they fall in love, they hurt, they're disappointed, they're happy. They have dreams, like all of us. But because of their place in history and how that's been glorified, and perhaps the leadership that the country looks to from them. I guess I read the other day that Kate alone, the business that she's brought to the British economy is like $1 billion and beyond, and Pippa is right behind her. Just what they in clothing and for British designers and people, you know, trying to get it, and how it was just been really exciting. And so I guess that's good for Britain. And so they have power. They have power to influence. So I guess for that reason, that makes them, you know, really fascinating.
And from a producing standpoint, people like Michael Jackson, people like the Royals, how do you keep your eye on everything they're doing? And do you have people who are assigned specifically to cover their story?
Well, we have a news desk, a big news desk, and we, our day is, I get up at 4 o'clock. I'm in the car at 5:15, driving in from West Hollywood, where I live, on a conference call with our New York office, and we're going over all the big stories of the day, and there's probably 20 producers on the call. We get in here and we start dicing down what we're going to do. If we need to shoot in London, we need to shoot in Paris. Do we need to get a crew right now, or move and get things happening right then? We try to react to the news of the day and find our own point of view, our own pop culture point of view on it, because the audience more and more wants a point of view. And I think that we really start designing that. If we report the news, the same news that they're reading on a website or saw on the Today Show 12 hours earlier, they're not interested in what we have to say. So we have to further the story and design that and figure out how we're going to do that. But we have people on those beats. I mean, any TV producer is just as successful as the ratings they get, right? So I want to go for stories that have a mass appeal. If you go after a story that is perhaps a music story with an artist that is a country music star, even though a big country music star, or a jazz star, that is narrowcasting to an audience. Not everybody likes the same thing. I mean, so you have to cast a wide net and go after what's going to get you, grab all those meters, all those Nielsen meters, and bring them in. And promote that and go for it. So those are the people that get the numbers when there's news around them. And you asked me about Michael Jackson later in his career. I mean, the day that Farrah Fawcett died, we broke that story. Bonnie Teagle, who works on our desk and is a very, very well-respected news producer for many years here in Los Angeles, we broke the story. Entertainment Tonight broke it. I talked to Farrah on the phone many times. We were the first to show the footage of her actually on her treatment in Germany, and talking to her and her friend Alana, and when she was so sick. And so we did a really great job that day. So then the feed's over at 1 o'clock. I walk outside, and the news desk comes to me and said, we think Michael Jackson's dead. I mean, you know, really, I mean, something's going on. There's an ambulance there. Something's not right. And I said, no, that's not happening on this, because you can't believe everything, and you can't believe everything that you read on big websites. So TMZ was the first to report that story, and they were right. But I remember standing out in the middle of that newsroom, and we were not going to go with that story. I mean, we do multiple feeds of the show, and we were not going to go with that story until we knew it was right. We got the footage in the ambulance, and I negotiated. I got a big get that day, because one of the photographers on the side of the ambulance had a shot of Michael inside that ambulance, a still photo with an oxygen mask, and them trying to resuscitate him. And I didn't know if he was alive or dead. You couldn't tell. But the agency that had that photo, I really pressed to make that deal, to have the exclusive rights to that photo, and we got it by being very aggressive and really getting it done. And the agency later on was very regretful that they made the deal they made with us, because they could have gotten a lot more money selling it worldwide, independently. But that was our way. We didn't break the story.
We have to stop to
Sure.
change tape.